The marble countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting of my kitchen, each surface perfectly polished to a mirror shine by Maria, our housekeeper. I stood there, surrounded by every imaginable luxury, yet feeling like I couldn't breathe. My name is Catherine Hamilton, Kate to the few who knew me before the money, and at 42, I had achieved everything society told me would bring fulfillment. The journey to this suffocating perfection had been methodical. Top of my class at business school, fastest rising executive at Turner & Associates, and now the youngest partner in the firm's history. The 7-bedroom mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood of the city stood as a testament to my success. Every room was decorated by the city's most sought-after interior designer, every piece of furniture carefully selected to project the image of success I'd crafted over the years. But that morning in September, something was different. I'd woken up to the usual silence. My massive house empty, save for the staff who maintained its perfection. The walk-in closet full of designer clothes felt more like a museum of excess than a wardrobe. The infinity pool, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflected the morning sun, its waters undisturbed by any sign of life or joy. "Mrs. Hamilton?" Maria's voice broke through my thoughts. "The landscapers are here for the weekly maintenance. Should I tell them to start with the east garden?" I nodded mechanically, but the question triggered something unexpected. Weekly maintenance. Everything in my life was maintained, scheduled, perfected. But what was it all for? The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had built a perfect prison. That evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing quarterly projections, my eyes fell on a small, worn Bible tucked away on the bottom shelf. It had been a gift from my grandmother years ago, before the promotions, before the mansion, before I'd convinced myself that success could fill the growing void inside me. I hadn't opened it in years, but something compelled me to reach for it now. As I held it, a business card fell from between its pages. Pastor David Mitchell, Grace Community Church. I vaguely remembered attending a Christmas service there years ago, back when I still made token appearances at holiday services to maintain the right social connections. But now, sitting in my perfectly curated office, surrounded by symbols of my success, I felt an unfamiliar urge to seek something beyond the material world I'd constructed. Little did I know that this moment of crisis would lead to an unexpected journey that would completely redefine my understanding of purpose, success, and true fulfillment. Grace Community Church wasn't what I expected. Located in a modest neighborhood across town from my gated community, its simple brick exterior and welcoming wooden doors stood in stark contrast to the sleek corporate buildings I was accustomed to. That first Sunday morning, I arrived just as service was ending, hoping to avoid the main congregation while seeking out Pastor David. Instead, I found myself swept into a post-service gathering that defied all my preconceptions. Sarah Chen, a retired schoolteacher with laugh lines around her eyes, immediately took me under her wing. She didn't seem impressed or intimidated by my designer outfit or the luxury car I'd arrived in, a refreshing change from my usual social circles. "First time here?" she asked, handing me a cup of surprisingly good coffee. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, dear." Before I could formulate my usual polished response, Pastor David appeared. In his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and wearing a simple button-down shirt, he had none of the polished charisma I'd expected. Instead, there was a genuine warmth in his eyes that made my carefully constructed walls begin to waver. The church community itself was an eclectic mix that both intrigued and unsettled me. Mark, a former addict now serving as the youth pastor, shared his testimony with a raw honesty that made my own carefully curated life feel shallow. Diana, a successful pediatrician, spoke of balancing her medical practice with her ministry to homeless youth. Even Thomas, the elderly janitor who kept the modest church building immaculate, carried himself with a dignity and joy that seemed to stem from something deeper than external circumstances. "We meet for Bible study on Wednesday evenings," Sarah mentioned casually as I was leaving. "Nothing formal, just friends seeking truth together. You're welcome to join us." I found myself nodding, surprised by my own response. In my corporate world, every meeting had an agenda, every relationship a purpose. But here, in this simple church with its mismatched furniture and genuine smiles, I sensed something different, something real. The following weeks brought a growing internal tension that I couldn't ignore. During the day, I maintained my role as the ruthless executive, making million-dollar decisions and managing high-stakes client relationships. But every Wednesday evening, I found myself drawn back to that humble church basement where success was measured in transformed lives rather than profit margins. My colleagues noticed the change first. "You're distracted, Kate," Marcus, my fellow partner, commented after a particularly challenging board meeting. The Hamilton I know would have destroyed that opposition in seconds. "What's going on with you?" He was right. The razor-sharp focus that had propelled me to the top was beginning to blur. The more time I spent with the church community, the more I questioned the cutthroat decisions that had once seemed so necessary. How could I justify laying off an entire department to boost quarterly profits when I now knew some of those employees through Sarah's prayer group? The crisis came to a head during a crucial merger negotiation. As I sat at the head of the conference table, listening to our team outline a strategy that would essentially destroy a family-owned business, Pastor David's words from the previous Sunday echoed in my mind. Success in God's economy often looks like failure in the world's eyes. "I can't do this," I announced, standing abruptly. The room fell silent, shock visible on every face. Kate Hamilton, the ice queen of corporate finance, was having a crisis of conscience? The internal struggle intensified at home. My massive house, once a symbol of achievement, now felt like a monument to misplaced priorities. The Bible study group had been discussing Jesus' words about gaining the whole world but losing your soul, and the truth of it haunted me through sleepless nights. "You're changing," my mother observed during one of her rare visits. "All this church business, it's not like you, Catherine. Think about your reputation, your position in society." Her words stirred up the fears I'd been trying to suppress. What if this spiritual journey cost me everything I'd worked for? Was I prepared to risk my carefully constructed life for something I couldn't even fully explain? Yet even as these doubts plagued me, I couldn't deny the growing certainty that I had stumbled onto something real, something worth any price. The question was no longer if I would have to choose between my old life and this new path, but when, and how much I would lose in the process. As my spiritual journey deepened, other aspects of my life began to shift in unexpected ways. My younger sister Amy, who I'd barely spoken to in years due to my demanding career, noticed the change in my voice during our monthly obligatory calls. When she hesitantly mentioned her struggles with depression, instead of my usual quick advice and hurried goodbye, I found myself truly listening for the first time in years. "You're different," she said, her voice cracking. "It's like I'm talking to the Kate from before when we were kids." That conversation led to weekly sister nights, something we hadn't done since college. As I shared my own struggles and discoveries, Amy began accompanying me to church, seeking her own answers. The transformation spilled into my philanthropic work as well. I had always made substantial donations. It was expected in my position. But now I found myself questioning the performative nature of my giving. Through Diana's homeless youth ministry, I began to see the faces behind the statistics, the stories behind the tax deductions. Mark, the youth pastor, invited me to speak to his group about success and fulfillment, though what I shared probably wasn't what he expected. "I thought I was coming to inspire you," I told the teenagers. "But my mansion feels empty while this church feels like home. Maybe I'm the one who needs to redefine success." Even my relationship with Maria, my housekeeper, underwent a profound change. One evening, I found her quietly crying in the kitchen. Her son had been diagnosed with a serious illness, but she was afraid to ask for time off. The old Kate would have simply hired a temporary replacement. Instead, I found myself driving her to hospital appointments and sitting with her during chemotherapy sessions. These smaller transformations were teaching me something profound about purpose and connection. Each relationship renewed, each genuine interaction, felt like another piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was assembling. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. No burning bush or blinding light. It happened during a routine Wednesday Bible study as we discussed the rich young ruler who walked away from Jesus, unable to give up his wealth. Sarah, with her characteristic gentleness, had asked each of us what we found hardest to surrender to God. I sat there, fingering the expensive pearl necklace I wore like armor, when suddenly the weight of it felt unbearable. Years of chasing success, of building walls with wealth, of measuring my worth in square footage and stock options, it all came crashing down in that fluorescent-lit church basement. "I don't want to be known for what I own anymore," I heard myself say, my voice trembling. "I want to be known for who I am in Christ." The words surprised me as much as everyone else, but they carried a truth I could no longer deny. Pastor David, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. "Kate, sometimes God allows us to achieve everything we thought we wanted, just to show us it's not what we needed. What do you feel He's calling you to do?" The answer came with unexpected clarity. The merger deal I'd been struggling with, the one that would destroy the family business, was waiting for my final signature. In that moment, I knew what I had to do, even though it would cost me everything I'd built my identity around. "I need to step down from the partnership," I said, the words bringing both terror and inexplicable peace. I can't keep serving two masters. The room fell silent, but Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Through tears, I saw nodding heads and understanding smiles. These people, who had no stock portfolios or vacation homes, understood something about wealth that had eluded me my entire career. True riches couldn't be stored in bank vaults. That night, alone in my mansion, I did something I'd never done before. I prayed without a script, without pretense, without trying to negotiate with God. Lord, I whispered into the darkness, I surrender. All of it. The house, the career, the reputation. It's all yours. Just show me who you created me to be. The peace that flooded my soul in that moment defied logic. For the first time since climbing the corporate ladder, I felt truly, completely free. The suffocating weight of success lifted, replaced by something lighter, yet infinitely more substantial: purpose. The news of my resignation spread through the corporate world like wildfire. Kate Hamilton steps down, mental health crisis, read one business blog. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned colleagues and confused clients. Marcus, my fellow partner, showed up at my house unannounced. "You're throwing away everything we've built," he said, pacing my living room. "Think about your future, Kate. If this is about the merger, we can restructure the deal." When I tried to explain my decision in terms of faith and purpose, he looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. My mother's reaction was even more dramatic. "Your father would be devastated," she said during a tense lunch meeting. "We didn't put you through business school so you could throw it all away for some spiritual crisis." She spat the words out like they tasted bitter. But not all reactions were negative. Amy, my sister, hugged me tight when I told her. "I've been praying for you," she confessed, surprising me. "Ever since you started going to that church, I knew something was happening in your heart." Maria, my housekeeper, wept with joy when I told her I was converting the pool house into a temporary shelter for Diana's homeless youth program. "This house needed children's laughter," she said simply, already planning how to make the space welcoming. The most unexpected support came from Thomas, the church janitor. After hearing about my decision, he shared how he'd once been a successful businessman himself before God called him to a simpler life of service. "The world sees stepping down as failure," he said, wisdom in his eyes. "But sometimes stepping down in the world's eyes means stepping up in God's plan." The months following my resignation were both challenging and transformative. I had to learn to live with less, not just materially, but in terms of status and recognition. The invitations to exclusive events stopped. Former business associates crossed the street to avoid awkward encounters. My social media following plummeted when I started posting about faith instead of finance. But in that stripping away, I found something precious: authenticity. The Bible study group became my anchor, especially when I decided to sell the mansion. Sarah helped me find a modest 3-bedroom house in a regular neighborhood, and the process of downsizing became an unexpected journey of liberation. "Each thing you let go of creates space for God to fill," Pastor David observed as he helped me sort through my possessions. We donated my designer wardrobe to a women's shelter, keeping only what I truly needed. My art collection went to fund scholarships for underprivileged students. The antique furniture I'd collected to impress others now furnished the youth center we were establishing. The transformation wasn't just external. I found myself diving deeper into scripture, not just reading but studying, allowing God's word to reshape my understanding of success and purpose. When Mark invited me to mentor some of the troubled teens in his youth program, I discovered that my business experience could be repurposed for God's kingdom. One young girl, Jessica, particularly touched my heart. Homeless after fleeing an abusive home, she reminded me of myself at that age, desperate to prove her worth through achievement. "But you had everything," she said one day, "and you gave it up. Why?" "Because having everything showed me that it was nothing," I replied, finally understanding the truth of those words. Real purpose isn't found in what you own, but in who you become and how you serve others. Through Jessica and the other teens, I learned to see success differently. Every small victory, a teen returning to school, a family reconciled, a life touched by God's love, became more meaningful than any corporate achievement I'd ever celebrated. My business skills found new purpose in grant writing and program development for the youth center. A year after my resignation, an unexpected email arrived from Marcus, my former colleague. The family business we had almost destroyed through the merger was struggling in the economic downturn. "I know you're into helping people now," he wrote, his skepticism evident even in text. "Well, here's your chance. They're going under." The news stirred something in me. Through prayer and counsel with Pastor David, a vision began to form, not of corporate takeover, but of redemption. The youth center had been teaching business skills to teens, but what if we could do more? What if we could create a bridge between the corporate world I'd left and the ministry world I'd embraced? Sarah's eyes lit up when I shared the idea. "Remember what you told Jessica about real purpose?" she asked. "Maybe this is why God gave you all that business experience." The pieces began falling into place with divine precision. Thomas introduced me to other business professionals in the church who had been quietly seeking ways to use their skills for ministry. Diana's medical connections opened doors to corporate donors who wanted to support youth rehabilitation programs. Even Amy, who had found her own path to faith, offered to handle the legal aspects through her law firm. "It's bigger than just saving one business," I explained to Pastor David as we finalized the proposal. "It's about creating a model of redemptive business practices, showing that success and service can go hand in hand." The timing seemed orchestrated by God himself. Just as we completed the planning, Jessica came to me with tears in her eyes. She had been accepted to business school but couldn't afford the tuition. "I want to learn how to help others like you helped me," she said. Everything was converging towards something larger than I could have imagined during those suffocating days in my mansion. The launch of the Redemptive Business Initiative took place in the same conference room where I had once plotted corporate takeovers. But this time, instead of PowerPoint presentations about profit margins, we shared stories of transformation. The owners of the family business sat beside former street kids who had found purpose through our programs. Corporate executives mingled with church volunteers, all united by a vision of business as a force for God's kingdom. Marcus attended, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity as he watched Jessica, now in her first semester of business school, confidently present our model of mentorship and sustainable business practices. "She reminds me of you," he whispered, "but with something more." The initiative's first project was restructuring the family business, not through corporate raiders, but through a partnership that preserved its legacy while creating apprenticeships for youth from our programs. As I watched the owner's son work alongside one of our teens, teaching him the craft his family had preserved for generations, I glimpsed God's economy at work, where value wasn't measured in dollars, but in transformed lives. My mother, who had initially seen my transformation as a fall from grace, stood in the back of the room, tears streaming down her face. Later, she hugged me and whispered, "Now I understand. This is what you were meant for." The moment that brought everything full circle came when Thomas, our wise janitor turned mentor, stepped up to the podium. He shared how his own journey from corporate success to humble service had prepared him to guide others. "True wealth," he said, looking directly at me, "is found in the currency of purpose." As I surveyed the room, Amy beaming with pride, Sarah wiping away tears, Pastor David nodding in confirmation, I realized that the suffocating mansion had been more than just a crisis point. It had been God's invitation to a greater purpose. What I had seen as stepping down had actually been God's way of stepping me up into my true calling. Today, the Redemptive Business Initiative has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We've helped transform dozens of businesses from potential corporate casualties into thriving community partners. Our youth program has seen over 50 graduates, including Jessica, who's now completing her MBA with plans to launch a social enterprise division. The mansion that once suffocated me has been converted into a full-time transitional housing and training center. Walking through its halls now, I hear laughter instead of echoes, prayer instead of phone calls, and worship instead of worry. Each room that once showcased my success now witnesses God's transforming power. My mother has become one of our biggest supporters, not just financially, but spiritually. She leads a weekly prayer group for business professionals questioning their purpose. Marcus, though not yet a believer, regularly mentors our students, saying he sees something in them, and in me, that he wants to understand better. Looking back, I realized that success hadn't been my prison. My definition of it had. God didn't ask me to abandon excellence. He asked me to redefine it. My business skills weren't wasted, they were repurposed. The suffocation I felt in my mansion wasn't just dissatisfaction. It was God's invitation to breathe deeper, to live fuller, to dream bigger. We're currently expanding the initiative to 3 new cities, with plans to launch internationally next year. Each day brings new opportunities to show the business world that true success isn't measured in profit margins, but in transformed lives. God's economy operates on a different currency, purpose. If you're struggling with addiction, questioning your faith, or wondering if God can use you, know that He can transform any life, any workplace, any situation. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Have your own story of transformation? Share it in the comments below. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.